The fire had already swallowed the second floor when Elsie Quinn heard the man inside cough. Everyone outside told her the building was gone. But the unconscious man in the smoke had a pulse, a gold watch, and enemies powerful enough to make sure no one went back in for him. Elsie had been a nurse long enough to know the difference between a scream and the sound a body makes when it is running out of air. The scream tears through a place. It asks for help loudly, shamelessly, still believing the world might answer. The other sound is smaller. A wet, broken drag of breath. A cough swallowed by smoke. A living thing trying not to disappear. She heard it beneath the roar of the fire. Beneath the crack of glass exploding from the warehouse windows. Beneath the shouts of firefighters pushing civilians back behind yellow tape. Beneath the sirens, the rain, the metallic groan of old beams bending under heat. Someone was still inside. Elsie stood on the wet pavement of South Harbor Avenue with her cheap sneakers soaked through, her scrub pants stained with soot, and one hand pressed against the side of her ribs where a firefighter had grabbed her too hard while pulling her away from the door. "Ma'am, you cannot go back in there," he barked. "Ma'am." She hated when people called her ma'am right before dismissing her. "I heard someone," she said. "You heard a building dying." No, her voice shook, but not from fear. "I heard lungs." The firefighter looked past her toward the burning warehouse, then back at her with the exhausted anger of a man who had seen too many people confuse instinct for courage. "That structure is unstable. There's a man inside. We cleared the front." "Then he's not in the front." Flames rolled along the broken second-floor windows like orange fabric in a violent wind. Smoke poured into the Chicago night, thick and black, mixing with cold November rain until the air smelled like melted plastic, river mud, and something chemical underneath that made Elsie's throat tighten. The warehouse had once stored machine parts. Now it was supposed to be empty, a condemned brick box near the river where developers hung banners promising luxury lofts while unhoused people still slept inside when the weather turned cruel. Elsie had been there because of a woman named Ruth Mercado. Ruth was 68, diabetic, stubborn, and living with her grandson in a tent under the Dan Ryan overpass after her landlord sold the building and called the eviction unfortunate timing. Elsie had been bringing her wound dressings for 3 weeks because Ruth's foot ulcer was getting worse, and the free clinic had lost funding again. The supplies were technically expired, which meant St. Anselm's Hospital had thrown them into the discard bin. Expired did not mean useless. Not to Elsie. Not to the people who bled outside the reach of private insurance. She had taken gauze, saline, burn pads, and 2 inhalers from the disposal cart after her shift ended. She had not stolen anything that the hospital still valued. That was what she told herself. What the hospital valued was donors, numbers, glossy campaign videos, and the names of wealthy surgeons printed on gala programs. People like Ruth were called community burden in budget meetings. Elsie called them by their names. That was why she had been in the neighborhood when the warehouse caught fire. That was why she heard the cough. And that was why, when the firefighter turned away to answer a radio call, Elsie ducked under the tape and ran. Someone shouted behind her. She did not stop. The side entrance was half collapsed, the metal door hanging crooked on one hinge. Smoke pushed out in hot waves. Elsie pulled the wet scarf from around her neck, wrapped it over her nose and mouth, and crouched low the way she had been taught in a hospital safety drill everyone else treated like a formality. The heat hit her forehead first, then her eyes, then the skin along her wrists where her sleeves rode up. Inside, the world narrowed to firelight and shadow. The warehouse floor was slick with water and ash. Sprinklers had failed or never worked. Old pallets burned along the east wall. A metal shelving unit had buckled across the center aisle. Something electrical popped overhead, showering sparks. Elsie dropped to one knee, coughing behind the scarf. "Hello," she shouted. The smoke ate the word. She crawled forward. Her palms struck glass, then gravel, then a strip of metal hot enough to make her jerk back. Her lungs burned. Every rational part of her screamed to leave, but then the cough came again. Left side. Behind the forklift. Elsie moved toward it, keeping one hand out in front of her. The shape appeared gradually, not like a person at first. A dark coat. A shoulder. A hand lying palm up in the ash. A man. He was on his side near a support column, half hidden behind a toppled stack of crates. His black suit was torn at the sleeve. Blood darkened his hairline, though the firelight made everything red. His wrists were zip-tied in front of him, not behind him, and that small detail struck Elsie harder than it should have. Someone had wanted him alive long enough to know he was trapped, then wanted him dead. She dropped beside him and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse. Slow. But there. "Hey," she said, voice rough through the scarf. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. His face was sharp, pale under soot, expensive even unconscious. Dark hair. Cut jaw. A broken watch gleaming at his wrist, gold dulled by ash. Not a warehouse sleeper. Not a worker. Not a man who belonged in a condemned building near midnight with his hands bound. A beam cracked overhead. Elsie flinched. Outside, someone yelled her name, though she did not know who had learned it. She grabbed the man under the arms and pulled. He was heavy. Too heavy. Her shoulders screamed. Her knees slid in water and soot. She pulled again, got him 2 feet, stopped, coughed so hard her vision spotted. "Come on," she gasped. "I am not dying in this building because you skipped leg day." The absurdity of it broke something loose in her chest. She laughed once, then choked on smoke. The man did not move. Elsie saw the zip ties again. They dug into his wrists. She reached into the pocket of her scrub jacket for trauma shears. They were cheap, purple-handled, stolen from no one because she had bought them herself after the hospital stopped stocking decent ones on her floor. The plastic resisted once, then snapped. His hands fell apart. A sound came from him then. Not a word. Pain. Elsie leaned close. "Good. Hate me later." She dragged him toward the door inch by inch. The smoke thickened. The exit disappeared, then reappeared through shifting black. Her lungs felt scraped raw. The man's shoes caught on debris. She kicked free. A piece of wire slipped, hit her hip hard on the concrete and kept pulling. Outside voices grew louder. "Elsie." That was Miguel. Of course Miguel had followed her shift gossip all the way to a fire scene. Miguel Ortega was a paramedic with tired eyes, perfect timing, and the moral patience of a man who had raised 3 sisters and trusted nurses more than doctors. He appeared through the smoke at the doorway with an oxygen bag over one shoulder and fury on his face. "You insane woman," he shouted. "Help me. I was doing that before you said it." Together they pulled the man across the threshold just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. The sound was enormous. Brick, steel, fire, air. Elsie landed on her back in the rain with the man's weight half across her legs. Miguel rolled him away and slapped an oxygen mask over his face. Firefighters swarmed. Someone dragged Elsie backward. She fought until Miguel grabbed her shoulders. "Stop. He's out. He wasn't breathing right. He is now. He needs trauma. So do you." "I'm fine." Miguel looked at her face and laughed without humor. "You have soot in your eyelashes and blood on your sleeve that better not be yours." Elsie tried to answer, but her body chose that moment to understand what she had done. Her hands began shaking. Her throat closed. The rain felt impossibly cold after the heat. Then the men arrived. 3 black SUVs turned onto South Harbor Avenue with no sirens and no hesitation. They stopped just beyond the fire line. Doors opened. Men in dark coats stepped out, not running, not shouting, moving with the disciplined panic of people trained not to look panicked. One of them was older, broad, with silver hair and a scar running from his ear to his jaw. He looked at the unconscious man on the pavement and his face changed. Not grief. Recognition of catastrophe. "Mr. Bellandy," he said. The firefighter beside Elsie went still. Miguel looked down at the man with the oxygen mask. "Bellandy," he muttered. "As in Roman Bellandy?" Elsie did not know the name well enough to react the way everyone else did. She knew it vaguely. Chicago knew it better. Roman Bellandy owned freight companies, restaurants, riverfront properties, 3 union-adjacent logistics firms, and enough political silence to make his name appear in conversations only after doors closed. The newspapers called him a businessman with alleged organized crime ties. Police called him a person of interest. Men in neighborhoods where cops arrived late called him before they called 911. He was 38, feared, polished, and not the sort of man a poor nurse from the West Side expected to drag out of a burning warehouse by his armpits. The scarred man stepped toward Elsie. Miguel moved between them instantly. "Back up." The man's eyes flicked to Miguel, then to Elsie. Did you pull him out? Elsie coughed, wiped rain and soot from her mouth and nodded. The man looked at her for one long second. Then he said, "You just saved the most dangerous man in Illinois." Elsie stared at him. Behind them the warehouse roared. "Then tell him," she said, voice hoarse, "to stop getting tied up in burning buildings." Miguel made a sound that might have been a prayer. The scarred man smiled. Very slightly. "My name is Cal Rizzo," he said. "I work for Mr. Bellandy." "Good for you," Elsie said. Then her knees gave out. She did not faint dramatically. People always think collapse has elegance if they have only seen it in movies. Real collapse is clumsy. Her body simply stopped negotiating with her. One moment she was standing in the rain, ribs aching, lungs burning, surrounded by firefighters and men who looked like court cases waiting to happen. The next, Miguel was catching her under both arms, cursing softly in Spanish. "St. Anselm's," he shouted. "2 trauma transports." "No," Cal Rizzo said. Everyone looked at him. Cal's face had closed. "Not St. Anselm's." Miguel's eyes hardened. "He needs a trauma bay." "Not there. You don't get to choose hospitals because of whatever movie you people are living in." Cal stepped closer. His voice lowered. There was a message sent from St. Anselm's dispatch before the fire call went public. It named this address. It said no survivors expected. That quieted even the rain for a second. Elsie stared at him through smoke-stung eyes. "What?" Cal looked at her. "Someone at your hospital knew this building would burn before it burned." The world tilted. Then the ambulance doors opened, and everything became motion. At St. Anselm's Hospital, men in suits watched donors more carefully than monitors. That was Elsie's private belief, one she never said aloud because nurses who were already one late rent payment away from disaster did not get to be philosophical about institutional rot. St. Anselm's had marble in the lobby, a pediatric wing named after a billionaire's dead wife, and an emergency department where patients waited 12 hours under fluorescent lights while administrators held meetings about patient experience. Elsie had worked there for 5 years. She knew which stretchers had bad wheels, which residents cried in stairwells, which surgeons spoke kindly only when cameras were present, and which closets still had supplies if you understood how to ask the night stock clerk without creating a record. She also knew Dr. Harrison Vale. Everyone knew Dr. Vale, chief of trauma, hospital board favorite, handsome in the cold, symmetrical way of men who expected rooms to forgive them. He gave interviews about community health equity, and cut uninsured patients from surgical schedules when their reimbursement looked complicated. He attended fundraisers with his wife, Meredith, a foundation director whose smile never moved above her teeth. He called nurses team in public and girls when irritated. Earlier that evening before the fire, Dr. Vale had humiliated Elsie in the back corridor outside the supply room. She had been ending a 16-hour shift, trying to leave with a paper bag of expired wound care supplies tucked inside her backpack. Ruth Mercado's grandson was waiting near the bus stop 2 miles away. Rain had started. Elsie's feet hurt. Her phone had 3 missed calls from her younger brother, Jonah, who was 17, diabetic, and pretending he did not notice how often dinner became toast at the end of the month. Vale appeared with 2 administrators and a security guard. "Open the bag," he said. Elsie stopped. The hallway smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. A floor buffer droned somewhere around the corner. "These are discarded supplies," she said. "I did not ask for a speech." The guard looked embarrassed. The administrators did not. One of them, Nora Fitch from compliance, held a clipboard like a weapon. Elsie opened the bag. Gauze. Saline. Burn pads. 2 inhalers marked for disposal due to packaging damage. Vale looked into the bag, then at her. "How long have you been stealing from this hospital?" The word hit hard because he said it loudly enough for 2 residents and a transport tech to hear. Stealing. Elsie felt heat climb her neck. They were expired for billing purposes, not unsafe. That determination is not yours to make. You throw away enough supplies every week to run a clinic. Vale smiled without warmth. And there it is. The moral performance. One administrator wrote something down. Elsie looked at the security guard, then away. He would not help her. People with hourly wages rarely risked them for other people's principles. "I was taking them to a patient," she said. You were taking hospital property off-site without authorization. They were going in the trash. And perhaps your career can join them. The residents in the hall pretended not to listen. Vale stepped closer. You have been warned before about boundary issues, Nurse Quinn. You confuse poverty with virtue and disobedience with compassion. Elsie's hands curled around the backpack straps. Poverty. He said it as if it were a diagnosis. Nora Fitch cleared her throat. Pending investigation, you're suspended without pay. Elsie went very still. Without payment, rent would be late. Without payment, Jonah's insulin copay went on a credit card already near the limit. Without payment, the fragile scaffolding of her life shifted in the wind. Vale saw the fear before she could hide it. His expression softened into something worse than cruelty. Pity used as a blade. Go home, Elsie, he said. Let better judgment prevail for once. That was the last thing he said to her before the warehouse burned. Now, hours later, she remembered Cal Rizzo's words in the ambulance. Someone at your hospital knew this building would burn before it burned. She tried to sit up. Miguel pushed her back onto the bench. Do not start, he said. We can't go to St. Anselm's. We're not. Where? County trauma. Belandi's people are not driving this bus. I am. Across from them, Roman Belandi lay unconscious, oxygen mask fogging faintly with each assisted breath. His suit had been cut open. EKG leads dotted his chest. One paramedic monitored his airway while another started fluids. His wrists were red from the zip ties. His face, stripped of reputation by unconsciousness, looked younger than Elsie expected. Not innocent. No one looked innocent under ambulance lights. But human. She stared at him. What was he doing there? Miguel's jaw tightened. I try not to ask questions about men whose employees wear funeral coats to fire scenes. He was tied up. I saw. That means someone left him. I also saw that. Someone wanted him dead. Miguel looked at her then. Elsie, a lot of people probably want that man dead. She knew he was right. That did not change the fact that when she heard him cough, he had been a body running out of air. Not a headline. Not a criminal file. Not a danger to the city. A patient. By dawn, Roman Belandi was in a secured trauma room at Cook County under a false registration name no one believed. Two uniformed officers stood near the hall pretending they were there for crowd control. Cal Rizzo stood outside the door like a monument to consequences. A woman in a camel coat arrived at 6:12 a.m., carrying a leather folder and wearing heels too sharp for hospital floors. She introduced herself to Elsie in the waiting area. Sonia Varga. Attorney. Elsie was sitting with a hospital blanket around her shoulders, a nebulizer treatment half finished, and a discharge packet she had not read. Her hair smelled like smoke. Her throat felt lined with sandpaper. Her ribs ached from dragging a man twice her size across concrete. His attorney? Elsie asked. For the moment, yours too if you want one. Elsie laughed, then coughed until her eyes watered. I can't afford a vending machine sandwich. I didn't ask if you could afford me. I asked if you wanted representation before police, hospital administrators, or Mr. Belandi's enemies begin treating you like loose evidence. Elsie stopped coughing. Sonia sat across from her. She was in her late 40s, black, composed, with silver at her temples and a voice that made panic straighten its spine. Not soft. Not hard. Exact. Do you understand what happened tonight? Sonia asked. I pulled a man out of a fire. You pulled Roman Belandi out of a fire. He had a pulse. That is not how the city will discuss it. Elsie looked at the closed trauma room doors. I didn't know who he was. That may help you morally. It will not protect you practically. Miguel, standing near the coffee machine, pointed at Sonia with a stir stick. I like her. Sonia did not acknowledge him. Listen carefully, Nurse Quinn. By noon, someone will leak that a suspended St. Anselm's nurse was present at the warehouse fire with stolen medical supplies. By evening, there will be questions about whether you knew Belandi. By tomorrow morning, if the wrong people remain comfortable, you will be blamed for something larger than you can imagine. Elsie stared. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I was suspended an hour before the fire. Sonia's gaze sharpened. By whom? Dr. Harrison Vale. The name changed the air. Miguel noticed it too. Sonia opened the folder on her lap and wrote one line. Tell me exactly what he said. Elsie almost refused. Not because she trusted Vale. Because saying humiliation aloud gives it a second life. But then she remembered the warehouse. The cough. The message from St. Anselm's. Roman Belandi tied up near a fire someone knew would happen. She told Sonia everything. The supply room. The bag. The word stealing. The suspension without pay. Vale's smile when he said poverty like it explained her. Sonia listened without interruption. When Elsie finished, she said, Dr. Vale chaired a community safety panel last month with Roman Belandi's Riverfront Redevelopment Trust. Elsie blinked. Belandi has a trust? Men with reputations often buy softer nouns. What does that have to do with the fire? I don't know yet. The trauma room doors opened. A doctor stepped out. Family for Robert Bell? Cal Rizzo's mouth twitched once at the fake name. Sonia stood. Elsie stood too, then swayed. Miguel caught her elbow. The doctor glanced between them. He's intubated but stable for now. Smoke inhalation, concussion, 2 cracked ribs, blunt force trauma. No major burns. He's lucky. Cal looked at Elsie. No, he said. He was found. Roman woke 36 hours later. Elsie was not supposed to be there. She had gone to county to give a supplemental statement to a fire marshal named Ruth Baines, a compact woman with cropped gray hair, smoke-roughened patience, and the moral expression of someone who believed buildings told the truth better than people. Ruth had asked Elsie to walk through the fire scene minute by minute. Not dramatically. Precisely. Where was the first flame? What did the air smell like? Did she hear sprinklers? Were the exit lights working? Did she notice containers near the support column? Elsie answered as best she could. Ruth wrote everything down in a small black notebook. When Elsie described the chemical smell under the smoke, Ruth looked up. Sweet or sharp? Sharp. Like nail polish remover and gasoline had a mean child. Miguel, who had insisted on driving her, muttered, Poetry from trauma. Ruth ignored him. Accelerant, she said. Then she handed Elsie a card. If anyone tells you this was accidental, call me before you believe them. Elsie was leaving the hospital when Cal Rizzo intercepted her near the vending machines. He's awake. I'm not family. No. I'm not his nurse. No. I'm not going in there. Cal studied her. He asked for the woman who insulted his leg day. Elsie closed her eyes. Miguel laughed so hard he had to walk away. Roman Belandi looked less powerful in a hospital bed, but not powerless. That was the first thing Elsie noticed. Some men relied on suits, height, rooms full of people waiting for their opinion. Roman did not. Even with an .4 in his hand, bruises along his jaw, oxygen cannula under his nose, and one eye shadowed from the blow that had knocked him unconscious, he watched the room like he owned every exit and had forgiven the walls for existing. His voice was rough when he spoke. You're the nurse. Elsie stood near the doorway. She had learned from difficult patients that proximity could be a negotiation. I'm the one who dragged you across a floor. So I heard. You're welcome. A faint smile touched his mouth, then disappeared when breathing hurt. Cal stood by the window. Sonia sat in the corner with a notebook. Miguel waited outside under protest. Roman's gaze remained on Elsie. Why? She frowned. Why what? Why go back in? Because someone was alive. Because she had spent her entire adult life watching people decide which lives were too complicated to save. Because she had been humiliated in a hospital hallway by a man whose hands were soft from never changing bedsheets, and she needed the world to make sense again for 1 minute. She said, You coughed. Roman stared at her. That's it. That's usually enough. Something moved across his face then. Not gratitude exactly. Something heavier. Men outside told you not to. Yes. You went anyway. Yes. Foolish. Elsie crossed her arms. Next time you're unconscious in a fire, I'll check whether the rescue fits your leadership philosophy. Cal looked down. Sonia's pen paused. Roman's eyes warmed by 1 degree. There won't be a next time. Good. My shoes still smell like arson. The word arson landed. Roman's face changed. So you know. I know buildings don't usually tie people up before catching fire. For a moment no one spoke. Then Roman looked at Cal. Leave us. Cal did not move. Roman's voice sharpened slightly. She pulled me out of a fire. If she wanted me dead, she missed her window. Cal left with obvious reluctance. Sonia stayed until Roman looked at her. I represent her for this conversation, Sonia said. Elsie turned. You do. If you consent. I consent retroactively. Roman almost smiled again. Sonia remained. Roman closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. I was called to the warehouse by my cousin Matteo Bellandi, he said. Elsie knew enough about families to understand the weight inside that sentence. He said a man named Harrison Vale had documents proving my port companies were being used to move stolen pharmaceuticals through charity medical shipments. Elsie went cold. Roman continued. I knew some of my shipping routes had been touched by someone inside my organization. I did not know who. Matteo said Vale would meet only in person because he feared exposure. Did Vale come? Sonia asked. Roman's jaw tightened. No. Matteo did. Elsie looked at the bruising along his hairline. Your cousin knocked you out? Not alone. And tied you up in a burning building? Roman's eyes opened. They wanted the documents destroyed. They wanted me blamed for the pharmaceutical thefts. They wanted my death to look like a criminal dispute in a condemned warehouse. Elsie remembered the message Cal mentioned. No survivors expected. Her mouth went dry. And St. Anselm's? Roman looked at her. What do you know about St. Anselm's? Someone there knew about the fire before the public call. Sonia's expression sharpened. Roman said nothing for long enough that Elsie felt the answer forming before he gave it. The shipments moved under medical charity cover, he said. St. Anselm's Foundation was one of the names on the paperwork. Elsie thought of the pediatric wing. The marble lobby. Dr. Vale's voice in the hallway. You confuse poverty with virtue. She sat down before her legs made the decision for her. The first article appeared that afternoon. Suspended nurse questioned after mob-linked warehouse fire. By evening her photo was on local news. Not a good photo. Her employee badge picture, taken after a double shift, hair pulled back too tightly, eyes tired. The anchor said her name with cautious sympathy, which was always worse than open hostility. She was described as a nurse recently suspended for unauthorized removal of hospital supplies who had been present at the scene of a warehouse fire, involving alleged crime figure Roman Bellandi. Alleged did a lot of work in that sentence. So did present. St. Anselm's issued a statement expressing concern, promising full cooperation, and confirming that Elsie Quinn was not acting in any official hospital capacity. Dr. Harrison Vale appeared on camera outside the emergency entrance wearing a white coat he rarely wore unless cameras were near. We are deeply committed to ethical community care, he said. It is heartbreaking when individuals let personal instability compromise public trust. Personal instability. Elsie watched from Miguel's apartment because reporters had found her building by 7 p.m. Miguel lived in Pilsen above his cousin's bakery, in a two-bedroom apartment filled with plants, boxing gloves, and religious candles his mother mailed from El Paso. His wife, Lena, put soup in front of Elsie and confiscated her phone every time she started doom-scrolling. Jonah sat beside Elsie on the couch, pale and furious. He's lying, her brother said. Elsie looked at his too thin face, the insulin monitor on his arm, the way he tried to look older than 17 because poverty makes children rehearse adulthood early. Yes. Can we sue him? Lena set down bread. Eat first, litigate after. Miguel pointed his spoon at the television. That man wears white coats like villains wear capes. Elsie should have laughed. She could not. Her rent was due in 5 days. Her hospital insurance covered Jonah until the end of the month if the suspension became termination. Her face was now attached to Roman Bellandi's in a city that loved simple stories because simple stories required less courage. Poor nurse steals supplies. Poor nurse gets involved with mob boss. Poor nurse unstable. Poor nurse disposable. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then Sonia texted. Answer. It is R.B. Elsie stared. Miguel leaned over. Is that who I think it is? Probably. Put it on speaker. No. She answered and walked into the kitchen. Roman's voice was still rough. They're moving fast. You sound surprised. I'm irritated. That must be new for everyone. A pause. I can protect you. Elsie closed her eyes. There it was. The sentence every desperate person wanted and feared. No, she said. Another pause. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need protection that turns into ownership. The line went quiet. Elsie's face heated. Maybe she had gone too far. Maybe you did not say things like that to men like Roman Belandi. Maybe Miguel's apartment would explode from the force of offended organized crime. Then Roman said, fair. She opened her eyes. I can offer security without control, he continued. A driver if you request it. A safe apartment if you choose it. Sonia is counsel independent of me. Money through a legal emergency fund she administers without my access. Elsie gripped the counter. You rehearsed that. Sonia shouted at me for 12 minutes. Elsie almost smiled. Good. She also said if I used the phrase under my protection, she would hit me with a deposition binder. Elsie did smile then despite herself. I like her. So do I reluctantly. The faint humor faded. Dr. Vale is not acting alone, Roman said. Mateo does not have the intelligence to build this. He has appetite. Someone else drew the map. Vale. Likely. Maybe not only him. What do you need from me? The truth. What you saw. What St. Anselm's throws away. What it hides. Who has access? Elsie looked toward the living room where Jonah was pretending not to listen. I'm just a nurse. Roman's reply came immediately. No. You are the person everyone underestimated who was closest to the machine. That sentence stayed with her all night. Over the next week, Elsie learned that evidence did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like laundry. Piled. Tangled. Heavy. Full of things someone had tried to wash clean but not well enough. Fire Marshal Ruth Baines confirmed accelerants at 3 points inside the warehouse. The sprinklers had been manually disabled 2 days before the fire by a contractor whose invoice traced back to a shell company owned by Matteo Belandi. Security footage from a gas station showed Matteo's car near the site, though his lawyer claimed he had been across town. Sonia subpoenaed hospital communications after an anonymous dispatcher sent her a screenshot of the message Cal had described. No survivors expected. It had been sent from a St. Anselm's administrative account 12 minutes before the first 911 call. Dr. Vale denied involvement. Of course he did. He denied with the practiced sadness of a man offended by the burden of being questioned. Meanwhile, Elsie began remembering things. That was how the deeper truth surfaced. Not in one cinematic revelation. In fragments she had filed away because nurses file away everything. Medication shortages, strange donor visits, locked storage rooms, charity shipments that never reached clinics, patient names that appeared on billing reports long after discharge. St. Anselm's Foundation had run a program called Mercy Outreach for 3 years. Officially, it sent medical supplies, wound care kits, insulin, antibiotics, and recovery medications to community clinics across the Midwest. Elsie had volunteered twice early on, and noticed the boxes looked fuller in promotional videos than they did when delivered. She had asked about it once. A supervisor told her inventory changes were above her pay grade. Now she sat at Miguel's kitchen table with Sonia, Ruth Baines, and a forensic accountant named Priya Nandakumar, trying to make memory behave like evidence. Priya was 35, small, unsmiling, and so allergic to nonsense that even Miguel seemed intimidated by her. She wore thick glasses and carried 3 laptops. Roman had hired her years ago to clean up his legitimate companies. Sonia had insisted Priya work under attorney direction for Elsie's case, not Roman's. Tell me about the supply chain, Priya said. Elsie rubbed her eyes. Supplies came in through St. Anselm's receiving dock, got inventoried, then Foundation staff separated Mercy Outreach shipments. Some boxes went to clinics. Some went to warehouse storage. Which warehouse? I don't know. There were different addresses. I only saw labels. Do you remember any? Elsie laughed weakly. I work trauma nights. I don't remember my own lunch. Priya stared. Elsie stopped laughing. Try. So Elsie tried. She remembered a label with blue tape. A South Harbor address. The same street as the fire. She remembered Dr. Vale walking through receiving with Meredith Vale, his wife, while donors filmed a promotional clip. Meredith had said, "Make sure the controlled inventory is off camera." At the time, Elsie assumed she meant narcotics. Priya typed. She remembered a patient named Teresa Bell, uninsured, who returned to the ER 3 times after being referred to a Mercy outreach clinic for wound care. The chart said supplies provided. Teresa said she received nothing but pamphlets and ibuprofen. She remembered insulin Mark donated appearing later on internal billing corrections. She remembered a locked cabinet in the foundation office that nurses were not allowed to access. She remembered Nora Fitch from compliance joking that expired supplies were more useful on paper than on people. Priya's typing slowed. "Say that again." Elsie did. Priya looked at Sonia. "That sounds like inventory fraud. Can we prove it?" Sonia asked. "Not from jokes." "What from?" Priya turned back to Elsie. "Do nurses still use those ugly green waste logs for discarded supplies?" Elsie sat up. "Yes." "Are they digital?" "Paper first. Scanned weekly." "Where are originals stored?" "Basement records." "Unless the hospital changed it." Priya's eyes sharpened. "Paper is where arrogance forgets to lie perfectly." Roman left the hospital against medical advice 10 days after the fire. Elsie found out because he appeared at Miguel's apartment door at 8 p.m. with Cal behind him, a bruise still fading along his jaw and a black wool coat making the hallway look underdressed. Miguel opened the door holding a wooden spoon. "No," he said. Roman blinked. "I haven't spoken." "I felt the vibe." Lena appeared behind Miguel, looked Roman up and down, then said, "Shoes off if you come in." Cal looked like no one had ever told him to remove his shoes in his life. Roman did. So did Cal, after a pause suggesting deep personal growth. Elsie came from the living room and stopped. Roman looked steadier than when she last saw him, but not healed. His movements were controlled in the way of someone refusing pain the satisfaction of showing. He carried a folder in one hand. "You should be in bed," she said. "I was bored." "You had smoke inhalation." "I remain bored." Miguel pointed the spoon at him. "Mob boss or not, if you cough blood on my rug, you pay for the rug and therapy." Roman looked at Elsie. "He speaks to everyone this way?" "Yes." "Good." Lena brought coffee because hospitality in her family apparently included dangerous men, as long as they respected flooring rules. Roman placed the folder on the table. "Mateo requested a meeting with me 2 weeks before the fire," he said. "He said St. Anselm's Foundation was using my freight routes without my permission. I thought he was warning me because he was afraid." "He was setting you up," Sonia said. "Yes." He opened the folder. Inside were printed photographs, shipping manifests, container numbers, invoices with St. Anselm's Foundation letterhead, signatures from Meredith Vale, secondary approvals from Harrison Vale, and routing authorizations through Bellandy Logistics subcontractors. Elsie picked up one page. The numbers swam. "These are Mercy outreach shipments?" "Officially," Priya said from her laptop at the end of the table. "Unofficially, controlled medications and high-value supplies were diverted before delivery. Some sold through black market channels. Some used for insurance reimbursement fraud. Some billed as delivered to clinics that never received them." Lena set a mug down too hard. Coffee sloshed. "My cousin's clinic applied for Mercy outreach. They got 2 boxes of masks and a blood pressure cuff that didn't work." Priya nodded. "On paper, they received $76,000 in supplies." The room went quiet. Elsie thought of Ruth Mercado's foot wrapped in discount gauze under an overpass. She thought of the bag Dr. Vale had called stolen. She thought of all the supplies thrown away, billed, moved, vanished. "Why burn the warehouse?" she asked. Roman's gaze darkened. "Because someone found the storage site." "You." "No." He turned a page. A photograph slid into view. An older man with kind eyes, wearing a janitor's uniform outside St. Anselm's receiving dock. Elsie's chest tightened. "Mr. Alvarez. You know him. He works nights. He gives everyone peppermints. He fixed the staff microwave with duct tape and prayer. He copied records from the basement storage before he disappeared." Elsie stared. "Disappeared?" Sonia's voice was gentle but direct. "He has been missing for 6 days." No. I'm sorry. Elsie stood so quickly the chair scraped backward. No. He has a daughter. He takes the pink line home. He texts her every break. Roman watched her face. Mateo's men were seen near his apartment. Elsie pressed both hands to the table. The room breathed around her. Not Mr. Alvarez. Not the man who turned off hallway lights to save electricity because this place wastes enough to feed God. Not another person the hospital had treated as invisible. What did he copy? She asked. Priya turned her laptop toward her. Waste logs. Scan manifests. Internal emails. Enough to prove the program was fake. But not enough to prove who ordered the fire. Elsie looked at the photograph. For the first time her anger felt larger than fear. Then we find the originals. The basement records room at St. Anselm's smelled like dust, mildew, and money pretending not to rot. Elsie entered at 2:14 a.m. wearing navy scrubs, a borrowed badge, and the expression of a nurse who belonged wherever she was walking because she had spent years making herself useful in places that ignored her until something went wrong. Miguel hated the plan. Sonia hated it legally. Roman hated it silently, which was worse. Priya loved it in the way accountants love archives. The hospital had not deactivated Elsie's employee access yet because bureaucracy was slow where it should be fast and fast where it should be kind. She entered through the east staff door with Miguel beside her in paramedic blues, carrying an empty equipment bag. You are aware, Miguel whispered, that if we get arrested, Lena will kill me before the law can. We're not stealing, Elsie said. We are entering a basement at 2 a.m. with a bag. We are preserving evidence. That sounds like stealing with a blazer. They passed laundry carts, sleeping vending machines, and one exhausted resident crying quietly near the stairwell. Elsie almost stopped. Miguel touched her arm. Not tonight. The records room door opened with her badge. Inside, shelves rose in narrow aisles labeled by department and year. Paper did not glow. It did not announce corruption. It sat quietly in boxes, trusting that no one poor enough to care would have time to read it. Elsie found the waste logs by memory. Green binders. Stacks of them. Miguel opened the bag. They photographed everything first. Priya had been ferocious about chain of custody. No removal unless necessary. No touching without gloves. Time-stamped images. Shelf labels. Binder covers. Page numbers. Then Elsie found Mr. Alvarez's handwriting. Tiny notes in the margins. Not official. Not meant for supervisors. Questions. Why discard unopened insulin? Why same lot billed to clinic after disposal? Why mercy boxes lighter than manifest? Why Dr. V took narcotic disposal sheet? The V could be Vale. Could be someone else. But Elsie knew. At the back of the binder, taped beneath a cardboard divider, was a flash drive. Miguel whispered. Peppermint Man had spy energy. Elsie's eyes burned. She slipped the drive into an evidence envelope. Then the lights came on. Not overhead. At the door. Nora Fitch from compliance stood in the entrance with 2 security guards and Dr. Harrison Vale. Vale wore a cashmere coat over casual clothes, as if being summoned to catch suspended nurses in basements was an inconvenience beneath him. Well, he said. This is disappointing. Miguel murmured. I disagree. It's very on brand. Vale ignored him. His eyes stayed on Elsie. You were warned about stealing hospital property. Elsie's hand closed around the evidence envelope. I'm preserving records tied to an active investigation. You are trespassing. My badge worked. An oversight. Funny. Your whole career is starting to look like one. The security guard shifted. One looked uncertain. Vale smiled. There it was again. That polished, pitying smile. You have no idea what you're holding, he said. Elsie lifted the envelope slightly. Then why are you scared of it? The smile thinned. Nora Fitch stepped forward. Hand over the materials. No. Elsie, Vale said softly. Do not ruin what little future you have left. Miguel moved closer to her. The hallway behind Vale filled with another presence. Roman Belandi stepped into view with Cal Rizzo behind him and Sonia Varga at his side in a gray coat, holding her phone up. Recording. Roman looked at Vale. You always speak to nurses like that? Vale's face went blank for one perfect second. Then he recovered. Mr. Belandi. I'm surprised you're ambulatory. People keep saying that like they're disappointed. Sonia stepped forward. Dr. Vale, Fire Marshal Baines and federal investigators are upstairs with a warrant for these records. You're welcome to continue obstructing on camera. Nora Fitch's clipboard lowered. Vale's eyes moved from Sonia to Roman to Elsie. For the first time, Elsie saw him calculate and fail to find the old math. Poor nurse. Mop boss. Paramedic. Attorney. Evidence. Witnesses. The room no longer belonged to him. He stepped aside. Not because he was defeated. Because men like Vale retreated into more expensive rooms when hallways became dangerous. This is not over, he said to Elsie. She walked past him with the envelope in her hand. No, she said. It's finally documented. Mr. Alvarez was found alive 2 days later. Not safe, not unharmed, but alive. Mateo's men had held him in a rented storage office outside Joliet, trying to force him to reveal where he had hidden the copied records. He had told them repeatedly that he gave them to a priest. He had not. Mr. Alvarez attended church only for funerals and free pancakes, a detail that made Miguel declare him a tactical genius. Federal agents recovered him during an operation built from Roman's information, Ruth Baines's fire investigation, and Sonia's insistence that every move stay clean enough for court. When Elsie saw Mr. Alvarez in the hospital, he was sitting up with a blanket around his shoulders and a peppermint in one hand. You look terrible, he told her. She burst into tears. He patted the bed beside him. Don't cry. Makes the doctors think I am dying, and then they get dramatic. She laughed through tears and sat. His daughter stood nearby, crying openly. Mr. Alvarez looked embarrassed by everyone's affection. I knew you would find the binder, he said. How? You yell at printers. People who yell at printers respect paper. That made Elsie cry harder. The flash drive contained enough to widen the investigation from arson to conspiracy. Emails showed Meredith Vale coordinating Mercy outreach shipments that were never delivered. Harrison Vale approved disposal logs that matched later insurance claims. Nora Fitch altered compliance reviews. Mateo Belandi's shell company handled warehouse security. A pharmaceutical distributor with 3 board members tied to St. Anselm's Foundation moved diverted medication into private channels. The fire had been set after Mr. Alvarez copied records and Roman began asking questions through his own contacts. The plan had been elegant in the way corruption loves elegance. Kill Roman in a warehouse tied to his freight routes. Burn the records. Blame criminal conflict. Discredit Elsie as a suspended nurse caught stealing supplies. Let Vale appear on television as the ethical physician saddened by institutional betrayal. It might have worked if Roman had died. It might have worked if Elsie had obeyed the tape. It might have worked if Mr. Alvarez had not believed paper mattered. The public collapse came at St. Anselm's annual Hope and Healing Gala. Sonia argued against public spectacle until she saw the program. Dr. Harrison Vale was scheduled to receive the Mercy Leadership Award for expanding healthcare access to underserved communities. Elsie laughed when she read it. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was throwing the program through a window. The gala took place in the hospital atrium, under glass ceilings and soft white lights, surrounded by banners showing smiling patients who had probably never been asked whether their images could help raise money. Donors wore black tie. Surgeons wore tuxedos with the strained discomfort of men missing their white coats. Nurses worked the event unpaid as volunteers, because service looked good in photographs. Elsie entered through the front doors wearing a simple navy dress Sonia had chosen because it looked calm on camera. Roman walked beside her. Not ahead. Beside. He was still healing. She could tell by the controlled way he breathed when they climbed the steps. He would never admit it. She would never insult him by asking in public. Miguel and Lena came behind them. Ruth Baines arrived in a black suit with a fire marshal badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Alvarez came with his daughter, wearing a tie covered in tiny peppermints. Priya carried a laptop bag like it contained explosives, which in a legal sense it did. Sonia wore red. Dr. Vale saw Elsie near the donor wall. His expression did not change. That was his gift. Even with federal investigators circling, even with subpoenas landing, even with rumors spreading through hospital corridors like smoke, he still believed rooms preferred him. He crossed toward her holding a glass of sparkling water. Elsie, he said. I hope you're getting the help you need. Roman's gaze turned toward him. Elsie touched Roman's sleeve once. Not hold. Signal. Mine. She looked at Vale. I'm glad. Anger can be clarifying, but it rarely builds anything. That's true, Elsie said. Evidence does. Vale's eyes cooled. You should be careful. People are very eager to use you right now. You would know. A photographer turned subtly toward them. Vale noticed. His smile returned. Enjoy the evening, he said. Try not to confuse attention with vindication. He walked away. Elsie's hands were cold. Roman leaned slightly closer, voice low. You held. She breathed out. I wanted to throw water in his face. I would have respected that less legally, more personally. She almost smiled. The program began at 8. Speeches first. Always speeches. The hospital president spoke about service. Meredith Vale spoke about community partnerships with a diamond bracelet flashing under the lights. A city councilman praised St. Anselm's for innovative outreach to vulnerable populations. Elsie stood near the back, listening to vulnerable populations described as if they were weather patterns rather than people standing outside locked clinic doors. Then Dr. Vale took the stage. Applause filled the atrium. He looked perfect. Of course he did. He thanked the hospital, his wife, the board, the nurses whose dedication made care possible. Elsie felt Miguel stiffen beside her. Vale spoke about mercy outreach as the moral heart of St. Anselm's, a program proving that medicine could reach beyond walls. Then the screens changed. Not hacked chaotically, replaced by authorization. Priya had worked with federal investigators and the hospital's interim compliance officer, a woman who had apparently decided survival required truth. The evidence package went live on the atrium screens and simultaneously to every reporter Sonia had invited under the phrase donor transparency briefing. First, the waste logs. Discarded insulin later billed as delivered. Expired supplies marked destroyed. Then claimed through Mercy outreach invoices. Clinics listed as receiving shipments they never saw. Then photographs of empty clinic shelves beside invoices showing six-figure deliveries. Then Mr. Alvarez's notes. Why discard unopened insulin? Why same lot billed to clinic after disposal? The room shifted. Next came the shipping manifest. St. Anselm's Foundation. Meredith Vale's approvals. Harrison Vale's signatures. Matteo Belandi's warehouse security contract. Then the fire report. Accelerant patterns. Disabled sprinklers. Door tampering. No survivors expected. The message appeared on all three screens. Sent from a St. Anselm's administrative account 12 minutes before the first 911 call. The atrium went silent. Vale stood at the podium, one hand still resting near the microphone. The Mercy Leadership Award glowing on a stand beside him. The screens changed again. Photographs of Roman's bound wrists from the hospital record. Elsie's smoke-stained face from Miguel's body camera footage after the rescue. Mr. Alvarez's statement. Then the final document. An email from Harrison Vale to Nora Fitch, copied to Meredith. If Quinn remains useful as the disposal point, keep her contained. If not, her suspension gives us distance. Elsie read her own name on the screen. Quinn. Not Elsie. Not Nurse Quinn. A disposal point. The words did not break her. They clarified the room. Reporters surged forward. Donors turned toward Vale, then away. Meredith stepped back from the stage as if distance could edit the signatures off the screen. Nora Fitch tried to leave through a side corridor and found Ruth Bain standing there with two federal agents. Vale lifted both hands. These materials are being presented without context. Sonia's voice carried from the center aisle. Then provided under oath. Federal agents entered the atrium. The sound of cameras began. Click after click after click. Vale looked at Elsie. For the first time he did not look pitying. He looked furious. You have no idea what you've done, he said into the microphone, forgetting it was live. Elsie stepped forward. Her voice was not loud, but the microphone caught it. I took trash to people you were willing to let suffer. You called that stealing. You stole medicine, money, safety, and lives, then called it leadership. The atrium held its breath. Elsie looked at the donors, the doctors, the board members, the nurses standing along the walls in black volunteer uniforms. Poverty is not a character flaw, she said. But apparently wealth can be. Miguel whispered. Damn. Roman did not smile. His eyes were on Vale, cold and steady as agents reached the stage. The Mercy Leadership Award remained on its stand as Harrison Vale was arrested beside it. That image ran on every local news station by midnight. The aftermath was not clean. It never is. People wanted one villain, maybe two. The evidence gave them a network. St. Anselm's Foundation lost half its board in a week. Meredith Vale resigned before being indicted. Nora Fitch cooperated after her lawyer explained arithmetic. Matteo Bellandi was charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, arson, kidnapping, and pharmaceutical diversion. Harrison Vale faced federal charges for healthcare fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, reckless endangerment, and his role in the warehouse fire. Roman's name appeared in headlines too. Some called him victim. Some called him criminal. Some asked whether his own past made him deserving of sympathy. Elsie refused interviews that tried to make her choose. He was tied up and unconscious in a burning building, she told one reporter who pushed too hard outside Miguel's apartment. If that isn't enough for you, ask yourself what kind of person you're becoming. She was reinstated at St. Anselm's with back pay, a public apology, and an offer of promotion from the interim hospital president. Elsie read the letter twice, then declined. Not because she did not need money. She needed money desperately. But some rooms can apologize and still smell like smoke. With settlement funds from the hospital, whistleblower protection secured by Sonia, and a restitution grant from seized assets, Elsie helped open a clinic on South Harbor Avenue 3 blocks from the warehouse site. They named it Alvarez Community Care because Mr. Alvarez threatened to haunt them if they used his first name. The clinic had no marble, no donor wall taller than the patient's, no promotional video showing empty boxes. It had wound care, insulin access, legal referrals, social work, a fire recovery fund, and a storage room with transparent inventory logs Priya designed so obsessively that Miguel called it romance for accountants. Ruth Mercado was one of the first patients. She sat in exam room 2 while Elsie unwrapped her foot and said, "You look tired, baby." Elsie laughed. "I opened a clinic." That was foolish. Probably. Good foolish. Roman visited on the 3rd week. Not with cameras. Not with a giant check. Sonia had made very clear that any funding from him would pass through a blind charitable structure with no naming rights, no influence, no leverage. Roman accepted this with the same expression he used for bullet wounds. He arrived after closing in a dark coat, with Cal waiting outside and a paper bag in his hand. Elsie was restocking gauze. "You brought dinner?" she asked. "Soup. Did Miguel tell you nurses can be bribed with soup?" "He said nurses cannot be bribed." Then Lena said soup is not a bribe if it is medically indicated. Lena is correct. They ate in the tiny staff kitchen under fluorescent lights that did not flicker because Elsie had personally bullied the electrician. For a while they talked about ordinary things. The clinic's broken printer. Jonah's college applications. Cal's inability to use the coffee machine. Mr. Alvarez's insistence on labeling every shelf with a label maker he had named Dolores. Then Roman said, "I sold 3 companies." Elsie looked up. "Why?" "They were useful to men like Matteo." "And useful to you?" "Yes." The honesty landed between them. He did not decorate it. "I am not clean," he said. "I know. I cannot become clean because you pulled me from a fire. I know that too. I can decide what still belongs in my hands." Elsie set down her spoon. "Is that what you want?" Roman looked toward the clinic hallway, where exam room doors stood open and a child's drawing of a dragon nurse was taped near reception. Yes. She believed him. Not completely. Belief for Elsie had become something built through repeated evidence. But she believed the direction of him. That was enough for one night. Months passed. The warehouse was demolished after the investigation finished. The lot became part of a city redevelopment fight that Elsie attended by accident, and then dominated by refusing to let council members call the neighborhood blighted without naming who had profited from neglect. Alvarez Community Care expanded into the building next door. Jonah started community college and texted Elsie pictures of every cafeteria meal like proof he was alive and fed. Roman recovered. Not just physically, though the smoke left a roughness in his breathing during cold weather. He changed in ways the city could measure and ways it could not. Belandi Logistics underwent audits so aggressive that Priya cried once from joy. 3 former criminal associates found themselves unemployed, then indicted when they attempted to create problems. Cal Rizzo began volunteering at the clinic once a month, mostly by standing near the front door looking intimidating until Ruth Mercado told him he was scaring the blood pressure patients. Elsie changed too. Not into someone fearless. Fear stayed. Simply lost voting rights. She still woke some nights smelling smoke. She still heard Vale's voice in moments of doubt, saying poverty like a verdict. She still overworked until Lena or Fallon or Sonia threatened her with consequences disguised as dinner invitations. But she no longer believed usefulness had to hurt. One evening in late spring, Elsie locked the clinic after a long day and found Roman waiting near the curb. No entourage. Just him, leaning against a black car beneath the soft orange glow of a street lamp. The river wind moved through his dark hair. He looked less like a headline there and more like the man she had dragged through smoke, the man who had woken in a hospital bed and asked why she went back in. "You missed your appointment," she said. "I was not aware I had one. Everyone who breathes smoke in my presence has lifetime follow-up." "That sounds legally questionable. I have Sonia now. Everything I do sounds legally questionable until she edits it." He smiled. A real one. Small but real. They walked toward the river without discussing it. South Harbor at night was changing but not fixed. New lights along the walkway. Old chain-link fences. A mural painted by neighborhood kids across from a vacant lot. The air smelled of rain, diesel, fried onions from a food truck, and water moving in the dark. They stopped near the place where the warehouse had been. The lot was flat now, fenced off, waiting. Elsie looked through the chain links. "I thought saving you was the reckless thing," she said. Roman stood beside her. "It wasn't. No. The reckless thing was believing that pulling one person out would make the fire over." He followed her gaze. "Fire spreads through what people leave unattended." She looked at him. That sounded almost like something Miguel would put on a mug. "I'll deny it." She laughed. The sound surprised them both. Roman's expression softened. Elsie looked back at the empty lot. "I was suspended that night. I thought my life was over because a man like Vale said it was. Then I heard you cough. A low standard for resurrection. It was enough." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I woke, Cal told me a nurse ran into the warehouse after firefighters stopped